Hello there, this is the voice of Stewart Pearce, and welcome to Deep Dialogues, a series of 12 remarkable conversations that I'm having with male soul stewards from all over the world, these extraordinary men who are transmitting unconditional love, empathy, and vast waves of spiritual intelligence, encouraging us, inspiring us, enthusing us into living a new level of living, and thereby creating a brave new world. So, ladies and gentlemen, I am sitting here with the wondrous Robert Holden. And this is a dream come true. I've been wanting to have a conversation with Robert for many, many years, and we've, like ships in the night, been passing one another. So the glory of the fact that he's sitting in front of me in the Findhorn community, who of course were my first major publishers.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's wonderful.
Until Findhorn Press folded.
Yeah.
And then another story took over, which I won't go into, which I'm about to resolve after 5 years of interesting journey trying to find a publisher. But that's another story that will remain in another recording. So, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to introduce this wonderful man to you in case you're in doubt of who is he, because he is a luminary within the human potential movement and has been for some considerable amount of time. We're talking about 20, 30 years, aren't we, Robert?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So anyway, so this is his little bio. Robert Holden, PhD, has created an immensely highly innovative approach to the field of psychology and its interface with spirituality. And as such, has been featured on the Oprah Winfrey Show, Good Morning America, the PBS show called Shift Happens, and also via two major BBC documentaries, The Happiness Formula, How to Be Happy, which have been shown to over 30 million television viewers worldwide. Robert is a very successful author with books such as Happiness Now, Shift Happens, Authentic Success, Be Happy, Lovability, Holy Shift, and the 365 Daily Meditations from A Course in Miracles, which gives you an insight into this wonderful man's psyche, The Course in Miracles. And Life Loves You, which was co-written, of course, with Louise, the wonderful, wonderful, late lamented Louise Hay. And Robert hosts a weekly show for Hay House Radio called Shift Happens. Now that's really synthesized because actually this man is capacious. Robert is capacious. There are so many different aspects to him, some of which I hope we're going to hear, because I'd love you to talk about your immediate project with the new book, if that's permissible. Maybe it's not.
Please. Yeah.
But so I just would love to give you context for how we're meeting and what deep dialogues can portend to be. And the story really starts in March, or rather in April, I should say, during lockdown, that suddenly friends, colleagues, whom I hadn't spoken to for years, were dialing in and saying, "Hey, how you doing? Let's have a Zoom." And so we would have a chat. And I noticed that in the silence of the global pause, in that bliss that I'm sure you were also experiencing, that there was a deeper resonance, a deeper reverberation, that we could hear the voice of Divine Mother and that she was speaking through us. So the quality of the conversations that we had were causative, deep, deep, deep dives. And there was something unusual in the resonance of what we were sharing. So I said to one or two of them, "Hey, we should record these. This is extraordinary." We were talking about mystical relationships, the cosmology of feeling, uh, all in the context of the shit that we were experiencing in global pause, or the bliss that we were experiencing, the two extremes. And one or two of them were so busy, Chloe Goodchild, my darling Chloe Goodchild, my soul sister. I said, "We got it." And she said, "Oh, but I'm so busy." Anyway, so my PA said to me, "Why don't you do it? I meet you through deep dialogues." And the project started with 12 extraordinary women in the summer. And then through the fall, it's been you boys, you guys. which has been really interesting. And it's become a hugely successful project with thousands and thousands of people tuning in. So I thank you. I welcome you warmly from the deep part of my heart and soul. And I thank you for being here. And tell me, where did the Happiness Project begin?
Well, may I first just start by responding to your wonderful act of imagination to offer us deep dialogues, because I just think it is the most wonderful offering at this time. I think there's a teaching just in the name you've come up with, which is that we do have to go deeper with our conversations, more than ever before. I believe that we evolve through conversation. We evolve by daring to have the conversations we most need to have. Sometimes the bravest thing in the world is to start a conversation we all know we need to have. And sometimes the next brave thing to do is to take that conversation deeper. And it just seems to me right now we need to deepen our conversations around all of the important things, happiness and success and love and money and work, and let's talk with each other more about these things. So I'm a huge fan of conversation. In fact, years and years ago, I made myself a business card which simply said conversationalist. And yeah, conversationalist.
I did the same thing.
No. Did we really? We did it
So
together.
this is when I really started, when I was sought after in the corporate world. And I thought,
Yeah.
how do I bring all of my, without, I remember my mother saying to me, I don't mind what you do as long as you don't frighten the horses. I didn't want to frighten them with too much mysticism. So I created conversationalism. And also another phrase that you all rather were that you mentioned earlier, busters.
Stress busters.
Stress busters. I called it, I was a stuff buster. I bust the stuff. Anyway, please carry on.
There we are. Well, look, that's just wonderful because, I was being invited into corporate settings, into politics and education and healthcare. And I was rather surprised and a little bit amused that I was being asked to do this. And I was really just trying to get a sense of, well, what is my real value here? What is it these people really want from me? And I realized after a while that part of it was this capacity to hold a conversation, to create the space where we can talk. And actually with the Happiness Project, the original mission statement very simply was talk happiness. And that was it, talk happiness. Why? Because nobody was talking about happiness. Back in sort of 1992, happiness hadn't been invented yet in England. And it certainly wasn't a topic of conversation in psychology. We talked about unhappiness. And we did that with the intention that if we could get rid of unhappiness, so to speak, then we'd all go away and be happy. So that was the working hypothesis. That was the theory. And it became clear to me after a while that if you only talk about unhappiness, if you only examine unhappiness, actually that sort of leaves happiness in the dark. You don't really know what happiness is. And happiness isn't just the absence of sadness, not at all. And happiness deserves to be talked about. And that's really what I wanted to do with the Happiness Project, essentially, was to start a conversation about happiness. And I thought the best way to do it was to create an 8-week program to see if we could help people be happy. And my colleagues at the time were very suspicious and were just dubious about this whole thing. And they said, well, look, there's no research anywhere which suggests that you can help people be happy. And I said, well, yes, but that's because nobody has done the research yet. So let's try. Let's see what happens. I'm prepared to fail. I don't mind. But let's see if we can actually create a program that could help people be happier. So we ran that for a couple of years. And then with the flow of things, the BBC approached me, and it was the QED Science Documentary Unit. that came together and approached me and said, look, we'd like to bring 2 sets of scientists to monitor your participants on an 8-week happiness program. So over the whole 8 weeks. And we want you to be very hands off. You're not going to be part of the science at all. We're going to have, it was Professor Michael Argyle at Oxford University and Professor Richie Davidson at Madison, Wisconsin. And they're going to do the soft science and the hard science, and we'll just see what happens. And essentially, we did that for 8. We took them through the 8-week journey. The research came back absolutely overwhelmingly positive, and the Happiness Project was declared a genuine shortcut to happiness by the Oxford University scientists, which I thought was a curious phrase. But also Professor Richie Davidson had done the hard science, which was looking at sort of the neuroscience of happiness. And we were able to show some hard science there of how the brain functions and everything. So it was so good, the results were so good that the then commissioning editor for QED said, these results are too good. We're going to wait 6 months and see if our participants are still happy. So we waited another 6 months, and we didn't contact these people at all, but we just said, look, if you would like to keep doing what we've been doing on these 8 weeks, we'd recommend you do that, but you don't have to. And after 6 months, again, the results were still good. So something had stuck for these people. And this was in the days, of course, really, Stuart, where we only had four channels. So you had to really watch this program. There was nothing else to watch. And it just took off in this country. I think, you know, we had about 5 million viewers that night for the QED documentary, which is, you know, in a country our size is a pretty big deal. And from there, I would say that got me into the conversation, and that gave us the chance to literally have a deeper dialogue on happiness and start to talk about happiness and what it might be. And actually to even ask questions like, what is the purpose of happiness? One of the reasons why we never studied happiness as psychology students was because happiness, well, actually there's a phrase, happiness is a pleasurable emotion with no evolutionary value.
Wow.
And yeah, a pleasurable emotion with no evolutionary value. So in other words, you know, there's no need to study it. It's much better to study something like fear, which has an evolutionary value, i.e. keeps us alive, of course. But I wanted to question things like that. I wanted to say, wait a minute, maybe we need to find a way not only to evolve by meeting our suffering in a good way, but actually maybe we could evolve through happiness one day. Maybe happiness could be a spiritual path as much as suffering has been a spiritual path for us. So yeah, that's what we did, and it was
So
terrific.
may I ask, what do you feel, you know, if you again, you have this wonderful iridescent way of being able to take something quite vast or complex and just go boom with it, introducing a phrase that's a synthesis. What is the purpose of happiness?
I believe that the purpose of happiness is to really help you find your note, Stuart. I believe that the biggest cause of unhappiness is the search for happiness. And I think that there's a world of difference between searching for happiness and following your joy. The search for happiness takes you outside of yourself over and over again. It takes you into the future. It takes you into something that might happen one day. But following your joy, whoa, this is different. Following your joy, you are now responding to something that's already here. And when you follow your joy and you recognize that joy, and you know this is that joy thing that's making me want to write a book, that's making me want to set up a coffee shop somewhere, that joy thing, I'm following that. And there's an intelligence to that joy. It's not always rational. It's not always intellectual. You won't be able to explain to your mum and dad why you're doing what you're doing. And your family will worry about you, and they will maybe think, you know, you're going through a strange phase. but the joy will keep telling you, do this. And there is something very intelligent about that joy if you follow it. And over time, if you keep following that joy, something else happens, which is, I'm going to borrow a phrase now from Joseph Campbell in The Hero's Journey, you will be met by supernatural aid.
Mhm.
In other words, you follow that joy, and there will be help on hand for you. And it will come to you in delightful and surprising ways. You'd never have been able to have predicted it, but nonetheless, it will be there for you. And that's your job, is to follow that joy. So I think in a way, really, that for me is the purpose of happiness, is that it's to help you be true to yourself. I think it's impossible to be inauthentic and happy. I don't know if if anyone's ever tried it, but if you try to make inauthentic choices and be happy, it doesn't seem to work. So happiness is like a feedback loop, which is telling you, yep, you're on track. You're being true to yourself. You are following your joy. You have found your note. This is it. And I think, that's the sort of thing that we're about. I would say one other thing, which is that the people who do follow their joy also discover some sort of extra layer to their talent or some other level of inspiration that actually surpasses what they think they were capable of. I do think there is something about that with happiness too, actually. And I've talked a lot with artists over the years where, one of the great fears for artists is that if I'm happy, my creativity will dry up. It's like I've got to stay in my suffering, otherwise the creativity is not going to happen. And my feeling is actually is I understand, but don't worry. Actually, with happiness, true happiness is not this monotone single note that doesn't encompass the range, that doesn't have the symphony in it. It's actually, there's a happiness that isn't the absence of sadness. There's a happiness that helps you meet the sadness in a way where you can work with that to create music, to create a story and to put something on a canvas too.
So many resonances. This is so exciting. You speak with such beauty. I feel that we're on the brink of a vast revolution. And I feel that the revolution is the revolution of the empaths, where the last 40 or 50 years work that has been accelerating, as we know, which was once called the New Age, and then the mind, body, spirit industry, and now the human potential movement or something. So we are continuously morphing, where the premise of, no, we always have to have the duality of joy and woe. William Blake wrote, joy and woe are woven fine, a clothing for the soul divine. When this ye rightly know, safely through the world ye go. And of course, I guess the balance between the degrees or the polar opposites, the duality, we know that some of the great poets, some of the great artists, I was thinking earlier when you were speaking that art is really the only vindication for suffering, that you and I have spent many, many years alleviating human suffering, firstly within ourselves and thence with the dear ones that come to us. But actually, at the same time, we can watch the drama as we're watching The Crown at the moment, because we're recording this conversation in November 2020, and seeing the disparateness between those poles. But I feel, you see, that we're moving into a quantum leap where the revolution of the empaths is stepping forward, where there is a sustainability in the union that we have with happiness and the union that we have with joy. Because we are meeting the super beings, we are meeting that transcendental aspect of our consciousness, where we're seeing ourselves in a very, very different way as a result of, as we reflect on this world, this year rather, the extraordinary horrors that we've experienced in 2020, and how it's been a reckoning point for us to say, okay, so what are we going to choose? How do you feel about a revolution of the empaths?
I've never heard it put that way before, Stuart. So I was really, really just trying to take that in as you were saying it. And I'd love you just to tell me a bit more, like, who are
Okay.
these empaths? What do we mean by that?
Well, I believe it's those of us who have journeyed in healing our suffering, healing
Mm.
meaning moving back to wholeness.
Yeah.
We know that we can see the scar tissue, but it's no
Mm.
the wounds are no longer suppurating, they're no longer weeping, they're no longer bleeding.
Yeah.
And therefore there's a quality of sustainable hope,
Yeah.
grace, elegance of thought, lightness of being, but
Mm.
with huge depth and profundity, because we know what
Yeah.
the suffering has taken us to. It's taken us to the very marrow of our bones.
Yeah.
Now, we know that from a cosmic point of view, that we've reached the point of the end of one cosmic cycle, and we're evidently in the breach between the development of a new cosmic cycle, which we call the dawning of Aquarius. And we
Mm.
also know from a cosmological point of view that from the East, it's been suggested for many, many years that the Lord Maitreya would arrive, and this would be the second coming.
Mm.
And we were told in this land that the Lord Maitreya was already here and living in Southall, was living in the north of London in the Asian community, and was working as a cobbler.
Mm-hmm.
Well, where is
Yeah.
he?
Yeah.
So I feel that cosmic brief has shifted. You see,
Yes. Yes.
I feel that the mastermind,
Mm.
the master being
Mm.
is Saint Germain,
Mm.
who is the cosmic Christ in not in flesh,
Mm-hmm.
who is shining light into the empaths to move forward as a body to create the body of Christ, to create the corpus of the Christ light. Because we've
Right.
all met the purity that
Mm.
sits within the immense profundity of A Course in Miracles.
Yeah.
Many of us have literally been through, if it's excited our intellects, our mental bodies, we've been through. So we have a way of being able to speak of it intelligently. But more importantly, we know that it's opened up a vast vibrational field within
Yeah.
ourselves and also within the world.
Mm.
And that it's we who are activated. So that's who I believe. I mean, that's the beginning. There are many other facets of what the revolution of empaths was. I
Yeah.
believe that Diana was one, do you
Mm-hmm.
see, that she was born, the time was out of joint, as it so often is with a chosen one, which is why, the third chapter of my book, Diana, the Voice of Change, had to be called the anointed one, the chosen one, because
Yeah.
there are human beings who are chosen. You are one. You are chosen to bring forth this light,
Mm.
just as Diana, in her way, was chosen to bring forth this light. What was interesting is that the book is about her record of essence as she was living.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, her greatest gift to her was, gift to us rather, was her dying, was
Yeah.
her passing,
Yeah.
because Shakti just, as we know,
Mm-hmm.
and statistically affected 3.9 billion people, which was almost 2/3 the population of the planet, one person dying.
Yeah.
So, who is it? Anita Roddick, who said to me, if you believe that small things are not significant, all you have to do is to spend a night with a mosquito, and then you'll find out how crucial they are. So anyway, so that gives a little bit of a landscape
Yeah. Yeah.
definition.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. No, I love that very much. I'm running a program at the moment called Metanoia. And so metanoia is this fabulous Greek word. And
Mm,
it's really, metanoia is, for me, it's about identifying the change that we're going to make in this lifetime that changes everything.
mm, mm,
And in a sense, metanoia is that shift from I am a body with a soul to I am a soul with a body.
mm, mm,
So I think that this is one of the great changes that's happening at the moment. And it's something that I think what I recognize amongst the empaths is that, as I'm hearing you describe the empaths, is that we know in our bones that there is more to this world than meets the eye.
mm,
We know that this world isn't really set up only for mortgages, cholesterol count, calories, and stuff like that, and what size jeans you're going to wear today. We get that there's more at stake here, and there is some sort of a soulfulness that I believe we are bringing into the world right now, for sure. And it does strike me that we are, where there is an empathy, is I think we understand somehow more than ever before that we don't, this is how I'd like to say it, is I don't think we have a unique purpose. I think we have a shared purpose.
Mm, mm, mm,
And we can express that shared purpose in a unique way, but it is nonetheless a shared purpose. And I think the thing we need to do very much as empaths, as we begin to tune into the world with all of our sensitivity and all of that takes, and it's a brave thing, but it is to be able to ask a question like, what is the shared purpose of humanity at this time?
mm,
Not my purpose, but the shared purpose of humanity. And how would I like to play a part in the evolution of humanity, so that I can express that in my own unique way, for sure. But this isn't a purpose I've just dreamed up. You know, this is, I didn't fall. This is not a fall from grace. I chose to be here. I gave my consent to come. So let's get with the program. There's not a mistake that I'm here, and it's not a mistake that any of us here. We are here. It's tough. It's absolutely tough, for sure. And especially when we're sensitive. And I would just add maybe one other thing, which is that often for many of us, the gateway into conversations like this is our wounding. It is our sensitivity. And for a long time, we often actually rule ourselves out from living any great purpose because of our sensitivity and our wounding. And we think, well, I can't play at that level because of what's happened to me. But actually, what I would say is that it's your sensitivity that qualifies you to participate in the shared purpose of the world. Actually, also, it's your wounding that actually is the doorway to living your purpose. So if we can embrace the fact that we're sensitive, that we're empathetic, that we've been wounded, and that rather than see this as, you know, as something wrong and that disqualifies us from the great conversation of the world, actually it's the fact we're so sensitive, that we have been wounded, that we are so empathic, which means we do actually are being called to stand up and participate, you know, somehow in this shared purpose. And one of the things I do think we also have to do, Stuart, is to actually take on, and this will seem audacious and even blasphemous to some of us, but it's to say, I'll be the Maitreya. I'll be the voice of Christ. Yeah. And until someone else shows up, I'll have a go at it. Because maybe that's the whole point. Maybe the whole point is we're all the Maitreya, we're all the Christ, you know, we're all bodhisattvas, we're all going to be inspired by Kuan Yin and every other great, you know, great ray of light that's on offer to us. And rather than waiting, you know, for somebody more spiritual to show up, let's have a crack at it ourselves, you know, in the meantime. And that's what I think, you know, we're called to do now.
This is so beautiful. And also, I mean, I regard it with such beauty because the clarity which we speak, but you can sense that my resonance is completely in concurrence with yours. And so this is, I believe, what the revolution of empaths is, you know. It is that we're all bodhisattva and that we meet because we suffer.
Yeah.
I normally, like you, work with large groups of people. Now, whether that was my old incarnation as a voice coach, working with, you know, for example, at Shakespeare's Globe, which you and I have shared about before, you know, in our pre-show chat, that I would be responsible to the hearts and the souls of 17 people, because normally the cast of a Shakespeare play is between 15, 16, or 17. Now, that goes from a young one all the way to a mature one, a senior gentleman or woman. And my responsibility would be to look after them. And one of the great things that I wanted to do was to awaken their notes so they could feel the uniqueness of their own splendor. But at the same time, of how can I take all of those notes and bring them together into a harmony of what the company is all about, so that they psychophysically could step forward and be amazingly great and lead the ensemble without, you know, upstaging anybody or getting into any ego games, where the whole company would support them and then coalesce back. I feel that that was an experience which I had over and over and over again, all over the world, because being at the Globe meant that I became ambassador for the project, and I was invited by amazing theatre companies, Shakespeare theatre companies or whatever, to go and teach them, and particularly in the States. That was an extraordinary experience as I think about it, you know, because I'm now living a very different experience and giving myself completely to this. And there's one other point that I just wanted to share, which I know will excite you, that for many years I was involved in a project of taking young Israeli musicians and young Palestinian musicians in Israel, and they would be led by a leading musician whose name I can't mention because of, you know, NDA, but who's a great friend of mine and is this colossus on the stage of classical world music and has been for many, many, many years, a brilliant musician himself. And we would take people, we would take these young ones, and when they would walk into the rehearsal room with their violins and their cellos and their flutes and their whatever, they had to be of a certain competency to become part of the masterclass. So they were already virtuosi themselves. They would walk in hating one another because there was the sectarian divide between Israel and Palestine.
Wow.
And you could feel the animosity and the antipathy on a number of occasions shocked me to the core. So I had to really hold on to myself because it was liquid hatred.
Wow.
And then they would start playing Brahms, Mozart, Tchaikovsky, whatever. And the whole thing would change.
Wow. Yeah.
The whole, through the harmony of music, through the harmonic of the collective vibration, everybody suddenly was coming together because you can't play separately. It becomes like a cancer in music. They were literally harmonizing. And then at the end, the maestro would give them to me and I would introduce them to their notes and we would end up hugging and kissing one another.
Wow. Wow.
Sound, you know, the healing modality of sound. So
That's
we're finding the vibration, I feel, of, we're naming that we're going through this extraordinary opportunity. I call it the revolution of the empaths. You know, it seems, because I love the word revolutionary because it suggests that we're being very active. But of course, you know, I'm completely apolitical. So, but, you know, practice the stance of trying to awaken us to what is positive from a moral point of view between happiness and woe. You know, what is positive? If I live a vibration of joy, will it be inspirational? And therefore, will it actually improve the lot of others? I feel that we literally radiate this. And of course, we know through heart math that the heart has an energy field 5,000 times greater than the human brain. So if we're moving into the tonality of this experience, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, we're onto something really extraordinary. Here we are naming this, which means that, you know, once we name, once we identify, it becomes a living reality. And there's great mystery in that, as we know, because, for example, in Judaism, we can't mention his name unless we're in sanctuary, in synagogue. And then, of course, Rabbi mentions his name because his presence is evoked. So this is the first time I've spoken this.
This is beautiful.
And
And I was
sharing
just
it
going to
with
say,
you.
thank you for sharing the story. It's so moving. I mean, I just got the, you know, such a vivid picture of, you know, these musicians. You know, it reminded me really also of the law of three in metaphysics, where essentially, you know, when two parties meet, nothing really can happen unless the third energy is invoked. And somehow you clearly did this through music. It feels like spirit entered through the music. That's the thing we have in common here. We can't find anything in common with each other, but we invoke that law of three. And I think I've noticed that in conversations is super important, and it will become increasingly important as we have, you know, right now we can see politically we have two-party systems everywhere. And nobody can talk to each other as a result. And the only time they can is when they drop their party politics. And normally the people who are prepared to do that have invoked this third presence. It is the where two or more are gathered. It's the, but there is this, we have to gather first, and we have to have some sort of an empathic resonance with each other. And then the third comes in, and that's exciting. I do think that's super
Of
exciting.
course, what's interesting is the way that we collectivize our experience. And sometimes, we're dismayed by what's going on out there, and we do live in polarity. And so we get caught in the terrible strife of antithesis. And
Mm.
then something happens to we human beings like COVID-19,
Yeah,
and we step in.
yeah,
We can't ignore it. We step in, and something transcendental takes place. Going back to
yeah.
what you were saying about we all become bodhisattva, it reminds me, as you mentioned, the master Jeshua, when he said, "And ye shall do this and
Hmm.
more."
Yes.
As everybody was going, "Ah, you
Mhm.
raised a man from the dead, Ma!" He's no, no, no. Let's just calm down. Ye shall
Yeah.
do this and more. And I feel that we're beginning to understand, that the era of data collection is over for me.
Mm. Mm.
Now, that's a ridiculous thing to say because, of course, we'll always be accumulating. But
Yeah.
you know what I mean by that, because what we're doing is we're realizing we have all the information we need, but are we truly embodied? Are we really embodying the
That's
happiness
it.
and the joy and the love?
Yeah, that's what
Uh,
we're doing for sure. And I think, like, if we take COVID for a minute, I think here we can perhaps use our empathy in a way which I hope would sound rather intriguing, which is that, what we've done initially with COVID is we've turned it into a war. Where the metaphor is entirely that there's an enemy afoot. It's an invisible enemy, and it's out to attack us. But if you do a little bit of research into viruses, you know that they don't attack. They never want to kill their host, because if they kill their host, then they're dead too. So they're visiting. They're not attacking, they're visiting. So if they're visiting, then, and I'm going to take a leaf now from St. Francis, my feeling is St. Francis would say to COVID, "Hello, Sister COVID, welcome. Let's have a conversation. Why are you here at this time? Yeah. Do you have an invitation for me? Is there something you'd like me to know?" Yeah. And I think it has to be that way, where we have a dialogue with COVID and we get a sense of how can we find a way to live together, perhaps, because viruses do find a way to live with humans, and humans find a way to learn to live with viruses. But if we could be perhaps empathic enough to meet COVID with curiosity and love, rather than warfare and defensiveness, I think then maybe we could find some sort of an opportunity in and amongst the frightening situation that it is. And it is a completely frightening situation. We have a virus that we have no history with. We have a virus right now that we still haven't had a calendar year with. Most virologists will tell you need at least a calendar year and 4 seasons to even know what this is. But if we could make it a learning opportunity and a conversation rather than a war, that would be interesting. And I think this is I think what we're about these days, is trying to meet everything with love. Yeah, and that's our goal.
And so we're really back to the theme of conversation.
Hmm.
And I laugh because, I mean, what you're saying is so profound that in March, I was running a retreat in Egypt, which I've been going to for many, many years and running retreats there for about 15 years.
Wow.
And it was the first honoring the priestess retreat. And I had this wonderful group of ladies. And of course, we had to cut the retreat short by 3 days because Egypt was about to close its doors, and I wanted to
Mm.
get everybody home because I
Yeah.
didn't want to maroon them for however long
Hmm.
because of the global pause. And so we got back. And I was not well, so I just went to bed. I did what the government had suggested, but also what my body was saying, just go to bed. And I was in bed for about 2 weeks and not well. I don't think I had COVID, but I certainly had something that happens to me, which is I always underestimate how much I burned myself, and my
Hmm.
meridians are not in alignment. So I manifest it, and I have high temperature for about 10 days, and then I'm fine. And I've
Hmm.
gone through a huge journey. Anyway, so there I am in this state, and I work with 12 angels who came to me in 87. And they call themselves the Angels of Atlantis. And so I was working with them and saying, what is going on? can I have a conversation with Sister COVID? Because she felt female to me. And Metatron and Michael came in and said, "You're very weak." And I said, "Yes, I want you to be my buffer." Can you be my energetic buffer? Because I'm feeling very, very unwell. Yeah, we will. And so Sister COVID came in and I said, "Tell me, why are you here? What's happening? You've come very fast and you've had an immense effect on my brothers and sisters' bodies and apparently also maybe on mine." And she said, "I'm here to reckon you all." How's the reckoning going, Stewart? It's a bit like shit at the moment, but actually, no, I see. It's what you're doing is you're broadening my conversation. And she left as quickly as she could. She actually said before she went, "I will leave as quickly as I can."
Interesting. Yeah. There is still that possibility. I mean, we'll see, won't we? But there is.
Well, I feel she's working with us. If it's a reckoning, we're atoning. So what is it we need to atone? Wow, have we seen it this year? In particularly the great sectarian divide or the great divisiveness of diversiveness of what's taking place within the immense republic of the United States, for example, as well as within all our lives, out a reflection of an inner reality.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, if I may, just also to respond again to the revolution of the empaths, I would say two other things that are happening at the moment, which I think it's good for us to recognize. One of them is that we are the media now. In the past, we always used to relate to the media as something else, but actually we're the media. You're demonstrating that beautifully right now, Stewart. You know, your numbers are higher than some of the national newspapers in the UK right now. So you've stepped forward with your voice, and you are the media, and we are the media, and everybody has a voice nowadays. I mean, it's quite a wonderful thing, really. If I think of when I was first working with being a writer, there was no outlets, you know, and there was lots of rejection slips. Now you can be a writer. It's very, very easy. You set up a Facebook account and you write, and you're a writer. You're published. It's happened. It's extraordinarily quick. Very, very easy. You can be a published writer probably inside an hour and a half if you want to be. You know, it took me about 7 years, but you know, that's the difference now. So we are the media, and that's something to, I think, enjoy and rise to, and really honor your voice in that process. The other thing I'd say is that I think the appreciation for what leadership is changing. And I think the old model of leadership was that there was a few of them, and that we were basically waiting around for them to get their act together so we could all have a better life. Whereas I think now what we have to see is that leadership isn't a position, it isn't a pay grade, it isn't a level that you rise to. Leadership is the willingness to participate. And it's the willingness to participate in the world. And right now, I think what we need to do is accept that each and every one of us is called to lead in our own way. And I think that leadership is fundamentally a way of being. I would also say that I think that leadership essentially is, leadership begins the moment you realize the world is a state of mind. You get an inkling that this world isn't as physical as it seems, and that it isn't really just about calories, cholesterol, and mortgages. Then you really have this opportunity to play full out in a way that you might not have played before. And I think when we know that the world is physical, but it's also a state of mind, then leadership becomes something about the way we show up. And the way we show up, that's an act of leadership. The way we show up, that's a contribution to the conversation in the world. And I think that's what we're being asked to do now. And there's a growing up in that process. I think one of the things that's difficult for those of us who feel sensitive and who are empathic and have, are carrying our wounds consciously, because everyone's carrying wounds, but the brave thing is to carry them consciously. Yeah. And if we are carrying them consciously, for many of us, we feel young. We feel young, and we don't always feel like we're old enough or qualified enough to really get going and to really be the leader that we could possibly be. But now is the time. Now is the time to say, look, we don't have to be entirely ready for this work, but let's be ready enough. And let's accept that somehow we are an answer to somebody's prayer. Let's accept that we are here to participate in the shared purpose of humanity. Let's accept that we are here to birth this new stage. There is a new stage, absolutely. And let's play our part, and let's accept that we are the media, we are the leaders, we are the answers to a prayer. And I think the more we step into that, then this sensitivity somehow alchemizes in a way, it becomes something else. So that, for example, at one point we might not be able to turn on the news because we feel too sensitive, but perhaps in the journey along the way, we will be able to turn on the news, because we'll be able to look at the news and see, well, that's my prayer list for today. That's who I can pray for today. That's where I can send some light today. That's where I can make a contribution today. I can join in with the suffering, but I can also join in with the solution to the suffering. And I can be part of that. So this is the exciting time now, I think, is to not to wait for the leaders to be better. Everybody, I think, pretty much has an experience in the world right now of seeing that the leaders do not represent what we believe, or what we would want to embrace, or what sort of a world we would want. And so if we can't see those leaders right now in our life, if they're not appearing to us, then actually that might mean that we are the leaders that we're waiting for. And that in our own way, we can do something. This is big talk right now. But what I would say is, if you remember that all acts of love are maximal, and that actually there's no such thing as a small act of love, then if you're participating in the world and you can, to your satisfaction, count one act of love per day, and you know that all acts of love are maximal, and that actually every act of love is connected to every other act of love that ever happened and that ever will happen, then you can be sure you do have a big purpose, and you do have a big part to play. And it's big because it's not just your purpose, and it's just not just your thing. It is the shared purpose of humanity. And that's the fun. That's the fun of it, is to join in with the story of creation, is to join in with, the theater of this planet right now, and say, yeah, I'm in on this. And I'm happy to be an instrument in all of this. And I'm signed up to something really, really big. And I might feel too small to know how to handle this. And actually, in a funny sort of way, you are too small to know how to handle it, but you are significant enough to know that you can play a part in it and be an instrument. Find that note, and let's play full out. Let's play full out for sure.
This is an extraordinary manifesto, and it's absolutely beautiful to hear you speak it. It bears witness to a vast possibility in our consciousness. And of course, apropos, the nature of what I feel you're describing, for me, it's called enlightened leadership, which is something that I've been asked to do more, teach more and more and more and more, guide more and more and more, coach more and more in the corporate world, because they're really beginning to wake up to ask the questions. Often
For sure.
they're not quite sure what the answers are, but they're asking the questions, which is the most important thing. We're seeing that there are models of leadership that are working, but what's interesting is that they're mostly ladies. Jacinta Ardern, for example. And forgive me, I can't remember names in this moment, but there are some very remarkable women throughout Europe who are now prime ministers or presidents who are taking over and contributing. I mean, Angela Merkel is one of them, of course, but I'm thinking of women that haven't really stepped forward into the mainstream consciousness at the moment, but are doing extraordinary work within their nationhood, that they are defining from a position of elegance, a position of simplicity, a position of collective intent and intelligence.
Yeah.
And you can see that their level of embodiment is something completely different from what we see raging on the world stage. The old paradigm is evidently meeting a point of release,
Yeah.
a transition. I just wanted to engage you in one other thing, because I know that you have other things to go to today. But I would love you to speak a little bit about how all of the richness of what you described for us about this brave new world that we're moving into in 2021 and beyond, that I know that nowness is something, or indeed, I was thinking of destination addiction and the evocation of the holy instant as a promise of, can we just calm down from rushing around like
Yeah.
headless chicken, doing, which is one of my great things. Can we just calm down and come to a point of being and live in the nowness of now? I wonder if you could just share with us a pearl or two of your wonderful wisdom stock on the substance of nowness and flow.
Yeah, thank
So
you.
we stop being like white rabbits. I'm late for a very important thing. What's the date?
Exactly.
Why are you late?
No, exactly right. In fact, I wrote a book called Authentic Success, and in the first chapter, I talked about the Monty Python sketch, the 100 yards dash for people with a poor sense of direction. And if any of you haven't seen it, you just have to imagine it's the silly Olympics and everybody's there at the starting line waiting for the gun to go off for the 100 yards dash for people with a poor sense of direction. And finally, the gun goes off, and of course, John Cleese and Palin and Idol and everybody else runs in all sorts of directions, running around in circles, running at great speed, it has to be said. But of course, they're not on a track. They've got no idea where they're going to. They're just running very, very fast. And we are a bit like that sometimes, aren't we? And until we add a bit more now into our life. And the key is really, for me, is about just adding a bit more now into our life. And so, yeah, I did a TED talk called Destination Addiction. And I was really musing on the fact that for me personally, I think I was born with fast genes. I was always in a hurry. I always wanted to get to somewhere, much of which was fueled by this sense of purpose and wanting to make a contribution. I didn't enjoy being small. I wanted to grow up. I wanted to be able to participate in something big. Yeah, I noticed that in my son Christopher as well now as well. There's this sort of sense of urgency. I want to get on with something important. The shift is to see that it's all possible now. And I think it's adding more now to your life is a lovely, lovely proposition. How can I add a little bit more now to my life? What that does is it takes us out of Chronos and into Kairos. And Chronos is this idea that the world and my life will be better one day. But Kairos is reminding us that it could be better right now. If we were to tap into this wonderful thing called now just a bit more. Now, the whole thing with now is that it doesn't really, we've used it too often as a stepping stone to get to a better future. I think most of us have read the mystics and the poets and the seers who have all told us to be more with the now. And I think for the most part, we all agree. We all go, yeah, absolutely. But not now. We're not going to do it yet. We're going to wait for a better now. We just need a better now. And when we have a better now, then we'll live in the now. And what we have to do is to really call the bluff on the now that we're in now. The now that we're in now probably doesn't feel so great because we're not here yet. Something's missing. We're going, something's missing. This now, there's something not quite right with this now. This now can't be the same now that the Dalai Lama is talking about. This now isn't as interesting as Eckhart Tolle's now. There's got to be a better, this can't be it. My now isn't shaping up, And it's like, well, no, but wait a minute. You think something's missing from your now because you're not here. That's the point. And as I often like to say, if you think something's missing from your life, it's probably you. So the invitation of now really is an invitation to be who you already are. Yeah. And that's a big deal. Yeah, that's a big deal. That's a shift from image to essence. We'll be working on our image for the rest of our lives, and we'll all be quietly or loudly neurotic one way or another with our own image. It's hard. It's hard, each of us dealing with our image all day long. But our essence, when we can drop into our essence, the essence of who we are, and find a way to express our soulfulness in the world, that exists already. That's here now for us. And the more now we add to our life, I think the more we meet up with our true self, and we can really be who we want to be. With the Happiness Project, if we go back to that as we finish up, one of the biggest realizations I had along the way was that my ego was always getting ready to be happy, but my soul was already happy. And that was one of the biggest shifts that I made in that journey, was realizing, wait a minute, every time I meet up with my soul, my soul's not neurotic, it's not ambitious, it's not trying to heal itself, it's not trying to let something go, it's happy already. And I think, actually each and every one of us, we are already who we most want to be. And it's just a question of really honoring that. And we find that in the now. Now's the meeting point. Now's the balcony scene in Romeo and Juliet. Go and meet up with now. Have a date with now. And when you have a date with now, and initially you'll think, okay, no one showed up. Oh my God, my date didn't show up. But if you put in a bit more now in your life, your soul will show up. And when she shows up, then you'll be reacquainted with the person you already are, rather than this image that you're trying to become. That's exciting. And that, I think, is what we're all trying to do in one way or another. And so then we realize, oh, I've been looking for this thing called my purpose. I am my purpose. I've been searching for happiness. Wait a minute, my soul is already happy. I've been looking for someone to love or someone to love me. Actually, wait a minute, my soul is the presence of love. I'm not here just to search for love. I'm actually here to be the presence of love. This is super exciting now, far more interesting than anything that came before. And that's what each and every one of us has to step into. And anyone who steps into this work will feel like they're not qualified. Anyone who steps into this will feel like they're not enough of this or that, not beautiful enough, not talented enough, not academic enough, not qualified enough. We're all going to go through that. We just have to remember that the soul is already happy. The soul is already whole. That's what we discover, I think, in the now. And that's why the world won't be healed in the future. Actually, the world is healed now and in every now, and that's something for us to appreciate. There's a mystery in that, but there is something to appreciate for sure. So, yeah.
Robert Holden, you have just given us a masterclass in miracles. And I'm very conscious of the time. That was literally breathtaking.
Stuart, thank you.
On behalf, I don't want you to leave just now, even though I'm going to press. I just want to say goodbye to you formally in front of all these wonderful people who are watching. But I'd love us just to speak just for a moment or two post-record.
Please.
But formally, I just want to thank you for whatever this endeavor is, this conversation of deep dialogues. That I want you to realize that you have taken us to an extraordinary moment of now. It's been a very remarkable encounter. You and I meet wonderful people around the world, and sometimes not so wonderful people. We have these meaningful exchanges. And for me, this will always remember, I will always be reminded deep in my memory banks of this, what you've just uttered has crystalline force. And so from the bottom of my soul and the depth of my heart, I say thank you.
Stuart, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody for wanting to participate with you, Stuart, in a deeper dialogue. This is what has to happen. You know, we will evolve through conversation. It has to be that way. And it's a beautiful thing. So thank you. And maybe
Well, bless you. And adieu. And, you know, what I would love to do is to say, I will be continuing this, and I'd love to invite you back.
I was going to say,
don't say anything.
No, can we do a part 2? Let's do a part 2 one day. Maybe in person. How about that?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to mention something to you in a moment. Okay, so on everybody's behalf, this is the wonderful Robert Holden. Please go to www.robertholden.com, and you will find the majesty, the magnificence, and the magic and the mystery of this extraordinary man. Bless you, bless you, bless you. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.